I'm just gonna say we're gonna start in a minute or two. Yeah. I wish I could sing and I'd break into a tune, you know.
Fascinating. We do that.
What's that? What's that? Yeah. If everybody wants to take a seat, we'll get started. Okay, thanks everybody for coming tonight. I know, I'm trying not to.
People out in the hall. It's your meeting. There's people here on time. It's not fair.
I'm Steve Johnson with MassDEP. I work in the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup, and we're here to talk about a site cleanup that we hope to get started this year. Am I not speaking close enough to the mic? I'm okay? The guy over there says I'm okay. Maybe I just need to hold it closer to my mouth. All right. Maybe too close. So I'm Steve Johnson with MassDEP in the Bureau of Waste Site Cleanup. I'm here with Karen Stromberg. She's our public involvement coordinator. And also with me tonight, Lauren Seuss is with the company that is going to be doing the actual treatment system at the site, and she volunteered to come tonight to help answer any questions about the treatment approach that we're taking. Before I get started with my presentation, I just wanted to thank a number of people that this isn't like the Oscars, though. Don't worry, I won't be thanking too many people. But Rochelle Santos did a ton of work in the last 10 days, 2 weeks, to get the word out and to help with translation. And I know Jenny Horrigan from the city, the mayor's office, also put in a lot of effort and help in coordinating it. And I feel like that we wouldn't have this number of people here if not for the hard work by Rochelle and Jenny and maybe even other people that I'm leaving out. I'm sorry for that. We tried to encourage everybody to sign in. The important thing, if somebody is already on our mailing list, it's not as important to sign in tonight or to leave your email address. But if somebody wants to be kept up to date with as we go through this cleanup or in the future, we have a mailing list for this waste site, and the way to get the word is to put your name on that email list. Okay. There's also some handouts out there that there's one from the EPA that talks about thermal treatment, and that's the gist of what we're going to be talking about tonight. And there's one that we put together by DEP just to try to explain some background and how we got to where we are with this waste site case. So I just want to start by giving a little background. I'll trade this in for a clicker here. Very generally, and if I'm being too general about the background, there's going to be a chance to ask questions at the end of the presentation. But I see a lot of familiar faces, so I have a feeling that a lot of folks here are already familiar with the industrial history of this property. It started as an oil terminal back in the 1920s, 100 years ago. It evolved into a company that brought in waste solvents and tried to distill and regenerate and repackage and reuse them. And then it eventually became a hazardous waste treatment, storage, and disposal facility. And that operation lasted until the March of 2012, when the facility was decommissioned. And DEP staff oversaw all that decommissioning work that went on. Just want to give a location, point out a few things. So there's the site over here. All right, there's some residences, the Woodrow Wilson School, the field down here, and there is a fence that separates that abuts the back end of the General Chemical facility. Down here is the CSX Railway. You can just barely make out the Sudbury Aqueduct that comes through here. And further south, it would be the Exelon substation. The other thing about this figure that I just want to point out is there's a lot of groundwater contamination from the General Chemical site. The groundwater flows away from the residences there and away from the school. It flows south, and then once it gets out into the wetlands, it turns more east-southeast. That's the direction that of where Sherborne is, and that's why some Sherborne people are here today. What did I do? This is a figure from the Phase 2 Comprehensive Site Assessment that General Chemical and their LSP put together. And the only reason I want to show it is that it shows a very busy operation. In this area here, all those circles represent either waste solvent or clean solvent. There's some oil tanks here, and then there's this loading dock area here, which we found quite a lot of contamination at. The next figure shows the specific areas, what we're calling source areas. These are areas that have enough chemical solvent that we believe it's going to act as a source of groundwater contamination for decades if there isn't cleanup work instituted at this property. Okay? So I'm going to bring your attention, I pressed the wrong button again. I specifically want to point out the oil storage, the solvent storage tank area and the loading rack. Those are two areas that we're first going to address with this cleanup system. Again, this just shows that the area called Area 1 on the immediate response action plan that was uploaded to our website. This is the area 1, and then the Area 2 is the tank farm area. Okay, there's the fence line with the school, and then there's also a fence. The entire property, it's about a 1.75 acre property. It's all fenced. Okay, so I alluded to this thermal treatment. Thermal treatment is a technology for cleaning up these kinds of solvents. The advantage, the idea is that it heats up the ground. In this case, electricity is going to be sent into the ground, into the subsurface, through a series of electrodes. I believe there's 27 electrodes between the two areas. And it's going to heat up the ground and the groundwater. And by heating it up, it vaporizes these chemical solvents that are in the ground, and then we vacuum extract those solvents, the gaseous phase solvents, okay? Once they're in a gaseous phase, they're a lot more easier to capture and recover than if we were going to try to pump contaminated groundwater or dig out contaminated soil. It's much more mobile and much more easy for us to collect those vapors. Once we collect them, it goes through a treatment train. Now, one thing I agreed to do for this talk is we have a cleanup plan that's been posted, and we have additional detailed design drawings that will be posted on Monday, February 10th. But I promise not to really get in the weeds too much with this. We did bring a fact sheet on that describes in general terms in situ thermal treatment technologies, and you'll see that the specific method that we're using is called electrical resistance heating, okay, ERH, if you see the acronym, and this is a way this is a technology that's been used. The TRS has done more of these ERH cleanups than the other companies combined. There's only a handful of companies in North America that do these kinds of thermal treatments. They've got a lot of experience with properties that are currently in use. So these systems are considered to be able to be safely done, even if people are working nearby where the electricity is fed into the ground. And the heat that is created is mainly kept in the ground. We don't want it to escape to the atmosphere. So there's either some type of a surface that'll be, there's actually, most of the site is got asphalt pavement. So there may not need to be more pavement, but sometimes there's an added thermal tarp that kind of keeps the heat in the ground. And the heat, again, is what is used to vaporize the chemicals. Okay? I wonder if before I go on, if I should take any questions specifically on the thermal treatment aspect. If there's anything that people are what I just explained. No. Okay. Here's a photograph of a typical thermal system. It doesn't look too innocuous. There's wires and there's piping on the ground surface, but it's something that has been used at a number of places where there's businesses ongoing at the property. This is very important for a lot of people, in particular, Principal Purnima. The timelines are fairly tight. So let me just walk back a little bit how we got to where we are. When General Chemical was a licensed treatment and disposal, treatment, storage, and disposal facility, they were required to put money in an account in the event that there was a need for a cleanup when the property was decommissioned or the business ended. And they did that. They put $1.85 million in an account. However, when the cost of the cleanup was estimated, it was much higher than that, and we directed them to put more money in the account, and shortly thereafter, we had a meeting with an attorney for the representing General Chemical saying, we don't have the resources to do this comprehensive cleanup, and so we're not putting the money in this bank account. So what DEP did is DEP took control, we through legal means, took control of that account and have it in a DEP account so that we can use it. We've spent some of that money doing additional testing to refine the specific areas with the most contamination on the property. And also, we're also focusing on these areas here because they are the most upgradient. So they're both highly contaminated and they're upgradient. This other area down here is also highly contaminated, but if we were to clean that up without cleaning up the other two areas first, it would just get recontaminated through groundwater migration. Okay? All right. Okay. So we have a prime contractor. Their name is Aptum. They have subcontracted with TRS, and they know that we want to do this treatment in the summertime. And there's two advantages. The main thing is that in the summer, it would take less energy to heat up the ground and to keep it hot, so that we're intending to get the temperatures somewhere between 90 or 100 degrees in that area, and that's what we need to get in order to get the chemicals vaporized. So we have the schedule that we think that as long as we don't get hit any speed bumps, we think that we can accomplish this cleanup starting with the construction phase in the first week of March. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. The first thing is the public meeting. Tomorrow is the start of the public comment period. And so if there's anybody that has comments or questions, then you can either bring them up tonight or you can send them to us either by mail, or I put my email up on the last slide, you'll see. And this way, we want people who are interested and concerned and want to know what's going on in their community. We want to get them that information. Okay. After the public comment period, we hope to soon thereafter start the mobilization of equipment to the General Chemical property. There's going to be some truck traffic, but we don't think it's going to be any type of a traffic nightmare. The property itself is not that large, so it's not going to, that almost limits how many cars and trucks can go in there at any given time anyway. The only traffic concern, I know that's a concern for the school and for the town, for the city. The only real traffic, the most of the traffic, is going to be the initial mobilization of construction materials and people to do the construction starting in March, and then when the system is dismantled and decommissioned, and that's scheduled to be in October, okay? So there'll be 2 short time periods where there might be some additional truck traffic. A lot of when the system is up and running, there's not going to be people on the site every day. TRS has a system where they can monitor the temperature and maybe some other parameters, but at least the temperature is very critical to monitor that, and they can do that remotely. DEP and our contractors are going to need to access the site maybe as little as a couple of times a week to do some monitoring of environmental media, soil vapor monitoring, air monitoring. There's also a liquid phase that has to be dealt with, and we may have to do testing for the liquid phase as well. So the construction phase is going to begin in March. It's going to include drilling for the electrodes, drilling for the soil vapor recovery points. There's temperature probes that are going to have to be installed. There's a power control shed that's going to be needed, and there's also going to be the granular activated carbon will be shipped to the site. The vapors that I talk about that we're going to collect are going to be run through 2 granular activated carbon canisters in series. So the first canister will collect most of the solvent, and then the second one it kind of polishes it off. And then when the first one is saturated, then that's shipped off site for the carbon to be regenerated, and then the second canister becomes the first one, and we put a fresh canister in the treatment train. Okay? Did I explain that well enough, Karen? All right. Okay. All right. Again, if there's any questions, if I mess that up, that's there. Yes, there is going to be a 400 horsepower, 40 horsepower. Thank you. Okay. Do you want to use that?
I was mentioning that during operations over the summer months, there will be a 40 horsepower blower, a vacuum recovery blower that we use. It has like a low hum that you may be able to hear. We use a lot of like sound insulation around this vessel to isolate that sound, but certainly our workers, when they're at the property, they'll hear it. It's all well below the noise decibel levels that require hearing protection and all that stuff, so our workers are safe on site. And then of course, while installing some of the infrastructure that's going into the subsurface, there will be drilling that is performed for a few weeks. So you will also hear some noise when augers are being spun and that subsurface infrastructure when it's going in the ground in March.
I'm sorry, I identified her early on. This is Lauren Seuss, and she works with TRS, the thermal treatment subcontractor. Okay. You had a question?
Yes, I do. From what your presentation showed me that there are 4 areas of primary concern. There are 2 that you're doing first because the groundwater would then flow into that if you didn't do them, into the latter 2 if you didn't do them first. This schedule, is this schedule for all 4, or is this schedule just for the first 2?
This schedule, I'm glad you brought it up. It was also a question that Sam Wong sent over to us from the city. I guess I didn't get to this yet, but this is we're using the money that we got from the account of General Chemical. It started with 1.85 million. It's a little bit less than that because we had to do some testing to refine the areas. We don't want to waste electricity on areas that are less contaminated. So that 1.8 million is a little bit less than that now, and that is still not enough to do a thorough cleanup of those two areas, the first two areas. DEP is has been authorized to add $400,000 onto that. And so even though the estimate is a little over $2 million just to clean up those two areas, we have a little bit of cushion with respect to anything that comes up, a contingency, something unexpected comes up, or if we wanted to, if we could run it a little bit longer and a little bit further. So right now, we have estimated, just from calculating the concentrations and the cubic yardage of the really contaminated area, we've calculated that we can remove something around 40% of the bulk of the contamination, 40%. There's still 60% of the contamination will still be there. And so we've been asked by other people, and Sam, on behalf of the city, has sent a letter wanting to know what about the other part of that. And the answer is we need to find other responsible parties who have liability for that contamination, and we are working on that. We're working both with lawyers from DEP and with the Attorney General's office to get people that have liability to fund additional and further cleanup. When that can happen, when that will happen, I would not make a prediction. Okay? But I would say that this is a great start. We're really happy that we have the contractor on board and the subcontractor, and that they're very experienced. And so I'm really happy that we're getting a pretty good chunk of the contamination out of there. Okay? So let me just go back to the timeline. The startup is a crucial period for us. We're going to have a mobile lab on site to do perimeter air testing and to do grab sampling of any areas that are area raised, they're called. Pick up any type of contaminant blips. We're going to have a mobile lab to be able to take real-time samples and testing. So there will be staff on the site every day for the first week or 2 weeks while we go through the startup operation and the optimization to get up the temperatures, how we want them to be, as hot as we want them to be. I think it's going to take, I understand from a colleague of Lauren's, that it's going to take 4 to 6, maybe even as much as 8 weeks, depending on the geology, for the system to get at peak removal temperatures. Like 90 degrees is where we want to get. All right. So the startup is going to be mid-June, and that will operate until the end of September, and then we can do the shutdown and demobilization. Okay. Daryl, did you have a question?
So it says October the system will be dismantled. Will it be done for sure by then, or what happens if it's not?
If we didn't get all the contamination that we, did everybody hear the question? Okay, I should have repeated it. If we don't get the level of cleanup that we had hoped for, then that's what we have a little bit of extra contingency money for, and we can let the system run a little bit longer. But there is a point where the money may dry up, even if we didn't achieve our goal of 40% of the mass removed. So there are some unknowns, and in terms of how effective this is going to be. But I feel like we have the right contractor and the right technology to address this in as efficient a way as possible. Yes?
I actually have two questions. At what level of contamination reduction is considered satisfactory? You're talking about 40%, that leaves 60% on that section of the thing. The second question I have is, what would the estimate in today's dollars be to completely clean up the site?
The first question had to do with the percent removal. We think we're going to get those two areas that we're attacking first. We'll be able to remove 95% of the contamination in those two areas. All right. The second question had to do with how much the cost is. Yeah. So you have these other two areas. Let's see. This one and then a smaller area that's underneath the building. Those are the two other areas you're referring to. There is a lot of other contamination that has even flowed off the property. So to get a full, thorough cleanup, I don't think that it would be doable with the same calculation. I don't think you could say, well, if it's $2 million to get 40%, then it would be $3 million to get 60%. I wouldn't go there. I think that it could be a lot more, because as you go away from the property, you get into the wetland areas. You wouldn't be able to use a similar technology. You'd have to use a technology that would be probably less efficient and take a longer time to achieve the goals. Okay, Rhonda? Okay. The question Rhonda's asking is, do we have an estimate of the amount of contamination on the residential properties? There was actually 4, I believe, that were bought by either General Chemical or one of their affiliated entities. And so they're part of the overall site cleanup, but they're not where we're going with the thermal treatment. Well, there's definitely less than what's on the General Chemical property itself. So some of the contaminants dissolved in the groundwater and flowed in that direction, and so the levels are definitely going to be lower because we have pure product of things like TCE on the General Chemical site. I don't think anybody's done any calculations of percentages, though. Judy?
Yeah, I think Rhonda's asking that question because people would like those houses. They would like to see those houses torn down. They're such blight. And we also feel they're a danger to the community of children going in them. But I thought the answer was they couldn't be torn down because of the contamination that's under them.
No.
So what could you do what has to happen to tear those houses down?
Somebody has to get a backhoe and go and tear them down. That's not what DEP is going to be spending its money on, where we're doing the cleanup. And there was no restriction on doing, if somebody told you, then I think that they either...
Okay, so it's not that the public has to worry about that.
In terms of, the homes can be demolished without any further cleanup over there, okay?
Yeah, the contamination that you're turning into a vapor, and it's going to go into this, charcoal thing and everything else. Is 100% of that vapor going to be going through that? Or there's going to be any leakage of contaminant?
We don't want there to be leakage.
I know that, but is there?
And we're taking the measures to make sure that doesn't happen. That's what the tarp over the asphalt, if there's a tarp or there's other types of covers that they could put on there, but that's why we're trying to make sure if the surface has a lot of cracks or holes in it, then that's going to be problematic. So we're planning to collect the vapors while they're in the subsurface soil, okay? We're not going to collect them once they get into the ambient air. We're going to collect them while they're in the subsurface soil, and we're going to route them through piping to the carbon treatment system. And so we will be doing monitoring and testing, and if we detect anything that's escaping, then we've got to figure out if there's a leak or a crack or something. We got to try to do something. But the intent is to have all of that contaminated vapor go through the carbon treatment system.
Hi.
Okay. This woman wants to question next. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Bob Tremblay, Superintendent of Schools here. Wonder if you could just speak to the impacts on, the timing of this with school operations, kids in the playground, disruption to school. We have the springtime is pretty heavy on state testing, and I'm thinking about all those potential impacts of noise and the potential for a leak or whatever it may be. I wonder if you could just address that to the extent that you can this evening as well.
Okay. Yeah, I actually have a slide talking about some of those things. If maybe I can jump to I think it's the next slide.
Oh, sure. I didn't see it in the slide deck in my
Okay.
printout, so I'm sorry. I wasn't aware.
All right. No, I didn't. I think we got to the end of this in terms of October is when we would be decommissioning and moving out of the property, okay? Monitoring and safety, this I think, Bob, gets to your question. So we're going to be monitoring soil vapor. We're going to be monitoring air. We can do sampling at the school. I mentioned that to the Framingham Public School people that I met with last Friday. And so we can, if there's concerns that there's anything getting over to the school, we really don't expect that to happen at all. I mean, I don't know how we could be more confident, but if it's peace of mind that somebody would have if we did this additional testing, then we're willing to come over to the school, both collect indoor or outdoor. But there will be perimeter testing on the general chemical property throughout the operation phase. Okay. I don't know if that got to. But the other thing, the question that was raised last Friday with some of your folks, I think Purnima was one of them. She wanted to know if there'd be restrictions on the use of the field that's over there, and as far as we know, there should be no restrictions and no concerns, and the system is designed to not have any type of releases or any type of impacts over to that fence line, and the way that we're going to back that up is by doing the confirmatory testing.
Okay, so just to be clear, though, I'm looking at the 3-month phase for construction and roughly the same time frame for the cleanup. And I guess for me now, it's more around the construction phase. That's the period of where they're doing the drilling and to the ground to prepare for the electrodes or whatever that may be. I'm just wondering how disruptive that will be just to school operations. And you may have already addressed this with the school administration and buildings and grounds. But I think for the benefit of the public who may be watching, it may be helpful to hear that.
Yeah, I didn't address that specific question on last week, but we did talk about a particular well that was installed. Am I pointing towards the gym, or is the gym that way?
That's right.
Outside the gym door, there is a monitoring well that's finished flush with the ground. So it's just, you see the metal cap. And that well, the last time we went to test it, has been damaged, and we need to replace it. And so, I'm afraid I'm pronouncing her name wrong. It's
Purnima.
Purnima, okay. Yeah. Purnima asked about the question, and she was concerned about, will she have to restrict activities out that way, or would there be a lot of noise out in that part of the building? And so we're going to try to talk with the driller on that particular well to see if they can do it off hours, either later in the day, or I don't know if they're willing to work on a Saturday, but we're willing to look into that so that it's not disruptive to the school. And if there's any other thing that you're concerned about it being disruptive, this is the time to let me know, either not just tonight, but you can send an email, you can send written, whatever you want in terms of comments and concerns. But I have to say that we're pretty convinced, we're pretty confident that there will be no restrictions for anybody that's at the school property, no impact to the school property, and we've got a lot of safety valves, safety nets in play to make sure that and to monitor to be able to prove it. So that's kind of the message there. Is there anything that you might want to add, Lauren, or you think?
No, I mean, the only thing I can think of is it might be entertaining for the kids, if anything. You bring up specifically the construction phase, and we'll be, drilling during that phase, right? So there'll be activity on that property. None of this stuff, of course, will happen off-site. But if the kids are allowed all the way up to the fence, there might be some interesting things for the kids to see. People wearing safety vests, hard hats, If anything, it might be a little entertaining. But I wouldn't expect any of that noise to travel this direction and to interrupt classes here by any means. That's not anticipated.
I had a question
Okay.
for quite a long time. I have several. All right, so is there any determination as to how fast the contamination is spreading?
Nobody has done a calculation type thing. I mean, sometimes when we work on groundwater contamination sites, we do calculations of, pump tests or falling head tests, and you look for hydraulic conductivity. What we have done is we've done semi-annual monitoring. First, for a while, for several years, General Chemical and their consultants did this semi-annual testing, and since they went under, we've taken over the semi-annual testing, and we haven't seen a significant or really a meaningful expansion of the plume from the wells that we have. So it's been fairly stable is the word I'm looking for. It's been fairly stable, but even still, we know that there's some migration, and we know that there's some discharge into, first, there's discharge into a drainage ditch that's over by Exelon. That drainage ditch empties into Coarse Brook, and then it flows down towards Sherborne and Natick. And a lot of the majority of the contaminant levels that get into that ditch and into the brook wind up, as they flow, they volatilize away and they go into the ambient air. But that's not what we want. Okay, so that's one of the cleanup goals that we have for this site, is to clean up enough so that there's not this discharge into the drainage ditch and brook. And also, I mentioned the Sudbury Aqueduct, because the contamination goes underneath the Sudbury Aqueduct, and some of it has seeped into the aqueduct. And the MWRA has had their engineers keep an eye on it, and they're concerned about, if that ever had to be used again. It was used in 2008 or 2010. And so if it ever had to be used again, there'd be if anything, it'd be a perceptual concern that traces of contamination from a hazardous waste site were getting into that water. Even though, if you did the math, it's so much volume of water going through there, and we're talking about parts per billion levels of contaminants that probably wouldn't be able to be detected much further downstream. But we don't want to have that anyway.
Okay. The other question is it possible to clean up the rest of it? And if so, do we have a timeline or a plan? And the new owners of the property, that Judy was speaking of all the property, did they buy the property knowing it was contaminated?
I'm not sure I know what you mean about the new owners.
General Chemical used to own where the houses are, the blighted houses,
Yeah.
and where their facility.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And you said that they went bankrupt, they went out of business. I was told that somebody else owns it now, another company. No? Is it
No.
So General Chemical still owns it?
Not to my knowledge.
Well, who wants it, right? All right, so it's for sale, but nobody wants it because everybody knows it's contaminated.
I think it's one of those properties that, there's a term in the field I work in called brownfields, and people know about that, right? And so we want these contaminated properties to be, they're blighted with some contamination. We want them cleaned up and put back into productive use. Unfortunately, a site like this is probably too far upside down for that, because it would cost millions of dollars. We think, and this is just a dartboard number, millions of dollars to get it cleaned up satisfactorily, and it's probably not worth that kind of money. That's my guess.
So are you saying that then basically the people in District 9 have to live with 60% contamination still?
No, what I'm saying, and again, I'm probably jumping around a little bit, but what I'm saying is whatever is left after we spend the $2 million+ that we have, whatever's left, we have to get money to fund further cleanup. And so what we have is our DEP attorneys and an attorney from the Attorney General's office have been working and doing, there's a legal term, discovery. It's not discovery because no one's filed a lawsuit yet, but they're doing their due diligence to try to get information and try to determine who would be a liable party that we could identify and get some type of a settlement.
Thank you.
Okay. Have you had your question yet?
Yes, but I just thought of another one when you said that.
Oh, but if you
Oh,
already answered the first
When
one.
you just said you'd find someone for the settlement, isn't the major one General Chemical?
But General Chemical is a dissolved company. They're no longer in existence.
But the people that owned it,
Yeah, there are some companies that have associations. They may not be legally linked to General Chemical, like Clean Ventures or some of these other businesses, but they may have enough affiliation that they have some liability, and that's what we're looking into.
okay, and my other question is, the technology or the technological contractor that you have, approximately what year did it become established to be improved over what the other companies do? The TRS, is it you call it, the thermal?
Yeah. You want to know when they were formed, the company was formed?
Well, when it evolved so that it's improved, about 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
I'm sorry, but I just don't understand the question. The process,
Well,
electrical resistance heating has been available as a technology for over 20 years.
But you said this is better than what the other companies had. When you first gave the explanation about TRS.
Maybe what you're referring to is this is proven to be a very effective cleanup technology, the thermal treatment and specifically the ERH, because it can deal with really high levels of contamination that some other options like chemical oxidation, where you add chemicals into the ground to have them react and destroy the chemical and destroy the waste chemicals, or pumping and treating, or air stripping and sparging. They all have limitations, and this thermal treatment technology has the fewest of those limitations. It's one of the best, and it's also one of the safest ways to clean up a hazardous waste site.
And that's been utilized for the last 20 years?
I know that the technology exists. Do you know how long it's been used, Lauren?
I can comment. So my company, personally, we've been involved in over 160 of this type of implementation. So that's just been over the last 20 years, for instance. We're not the only company that does this. There's other contractors that do this type of work. So combined with those projects as well, there's several hundreds of these projects in the world. There's been a lot of great projects, implemented underneath residential buildings, commercial buildings. We do a lot of work around dry cleaners. This is a lot of the same type of chemicals that we're dealing with at this site are also used in dry cleaning operations. We do this type of work at DoD facilities. We just wrapped up a project in New York City where we did this technology underneath, a big structure, put all this infrastructure in place in the basement of a building. So you'd be surprised where these projects are. A lot of times at General Chemical, what we're planning on doing is putting this infrastructure all at grade. So you'll be able to see, if you're looking into the fence, some of our pipes that are going into the vapor recovery and treatment system, some of the cables that we use to energize the electrodes that we're working with that are heating up the subsurface. But sometimes we even put that infrastructure below grade. And so you can be walking on a sidewalk that has this stuff, right underneath. You'd be surprised to find out, where these projects are located.
Is it worth it, if the fencing is there, to leave the construction until we amass more money?
More money, certainly.
The fence is going to stay.
What?
The fence, you're asking if the fence should stay up?
No, I'm not concerned. I'm saying that probably you need the fence there if the construction material could be left there, the pipes and all, because this must cost, what, $500,000 just to put up the construction?
Yeah, the only concern I have is that it's hard to predict when a settlement might occur. I mean, these types of things could take a
So
while.
it'll be too long to leave the construction material all up.
We would have them leave whatever they don't need anymore, but if they need, if these if there's components that they would use on their next job, then we couldn't have them, ask them to leave it there at our place, at the General Chemical place for, for a year or 2 or 3, however long it would take. Okay? There's a question in back? Here, the microphone is on its way.
I know the federal government has projects when it's really big and they actually contribute money. Is this too small to get the federal government involved to try to pick up the additional 3-4 million that's needed to clean the whole site?
You're talking about the federal, what's called the Superfund program.
Yes.
Yeah. It's the formal term is the National Priorities List, but everybody calls it the Superfund. So we actually asked when General Chemical went under. They said we're done. One of the first things we did is we asked our colleagues. I guess we could call them colleagues. They're in a federal agency, not a state, but we work hand in glove with them on many projects. And we asked them if they could do an evaluation of whether this site would qualify for the Superfund list. And after they did an awful lot, many hours of reviewing the information and looking at the different exposure pathways, they concluded that it would not qualify for the Superfund. And the main reason is because there are no currently ongoing exposures that that would drive the score way up. So the fact that it's in a stable, for the most part, stable condition, the groundwater, and nobody is currently being exposed, then the score, it gets a lower score on the NPL.
Can I have a follow-up?
All right.
If that changes, and because you said that there is seepage going towards Sudbury and what have you, if that changes in that future, could that decision by the federal government also change?
If things change, then we would be glad to have them revisit it. They may push back and say, well, we've already checked it once. But if conditions changed, they're people that we work with, and so they would likely cooperate. But we're trying to do, by getting as much of the contamination out as we can, it's going to reduce, the concern that there's going to be migration and all that. Yes.
Hi. My quick question is, for the 160 projects that you guys have taken up so far, what is your success rate? So you see a lot of pipes and vapor and collection and treatment. So what are the odds of this breaking, and what happens if that does release, being so close to the school? And then on the other side of that, the magnitude of the project, how many projects have you guys successfully had within the acreage that this component is? So I understand that the $2 million mark and seeking more for more work to be done, but the work that you've done so far with other areas, how does it compare to this one? And then within that, what are quote unquote accidents or breaking or things that happen that you can't pretty much call for right now, but has this happened before? Do these things break? And then if they do, what's the protocol?
That's 10 questions, I think. So you're gonna have to help me with some of them. But so I guess let me back up to one of your first questions. You asked what happens if something goes wrong during the project. So during operations, we have what we refer to as our safety interlock system. We have a lot of different things that we monitor, and we actually automate interlocks into our system to shut things down if something happens. Because the reality is something's going to happen at some point in time. These things never run 100% of the time without something breaking along the way, right? We have moving parts, we have pumps, we have, just equipment that needs to be maintained. And whether it's a planned event where we show up to the site and take the system offline temporarily to do preventative maintenance, or if something happens in the middle of the night. So when these things do arise, we have an alarm that occurs. And this is, not a blaring alarm. This is a silent alarm, but it notifies our staff, our project team, and anyone else who wants to be a part of that. But what happens then is as Steve had alluded to before, we remotely operate these systems, so we log on to the system immediately to check out what's going on. 90% of the time, we're able to fix the issue right then and there, and turn everything back on. Sometimes we have to actually mobilize to the site, and this happens in the middle of the night. It never happens during the daytime when you're actually at the site. It happens on holidays, and we just come out. That's part of our job. We have to show up when these things happen. But there's lots of different safety interlocks that are built into the system that literally powers things down if there's a loss of vacuum, if there is something that occurs. Follow up. I know you had other questions, so I only addressed one, but.
Do you guys offer that kind of data for people to see where you have had oops before, and from those 160 projects that you mentioned that you do, and then what they are and how you've handled them? Do we have access to that information?
Yeah, so you also had a question, have you been able to meet your goals at 160 of your projects? So this is a really powerful technology. The reason why we have 160 projects is because it is so powerful, and it does remove the contaminant mass from the subsurface. So word travels quickly, and then we go to the next site. We've been able to meet whatever those site remedial, contractual goals have been for TRS at every single project site that we've worked at. I don't know if that addresses your question. I don't know if there's a database of information on these projects and what has gone, wrong. But I can tell you, what's pretty typical for us is we've got a lot of equipment that's in operation at the site, and something will just break along the way. It's pretty common for us to just have to come out and fix it. We've got staff in the area, and that's what they do. That's literally what they do in operations, 24/7. They show up in order to fix it, keep it running, keep those project goals in mind, and get to the end point.
Rochelle is giving the microphone, so, okay. I'll go with you first.
So as a parent and a school committee member, I'm concerned with the comment that was made that our kids will really enjoy seeing this. What are you doing to mitigate our kids running over to near that site? Are you putting up a secondary fence? Are you putting up something so that our kids can't see it? What is going to distract our kids from running over to that area? Because I'm really concerned that there was kind of a laugh in that conversation of, oh, your kids will probably really enjoy seeing that. They probably really would, but I don't want my child or any other child near any of that.
Okay. Yeah, I think that statement was made because we felt that they would be perfectly safe there, and I get it. You wanted a little extra comfort about the safety, but I think that's why the statement was made, because we feel very confident that it's going to be safe. But there has been, I think it was Matt Torday who commented to me last Friday when I was here that would it be good to cordon off the area from where the fence, the current fence is that separates the school property from General Chemical, and that's something that could be considered.
Okay, I would really like that to be considered. I'd really like to see something that distracts our kids from any of that equipment that's going to be running out there.
Okay. Do you have the mic now? Okay.
I'm sorry, my name's Robin. I understand the fix currently. I'm kind of ignorant about the past and the future. So, going back to the 60s and 70s, we got cigarettes and lead and asbestos, and we don't know. So this isn't sarcastic by any means, but let's say we issue a permit for someone to use a solvent and gets in the soil, and 30 years later we're like, this is bad, we need to clean it up. How do we prevent that going forward for 20 years from now, that MassDEP is going around with a clipboard saying, this is leaking now, not 20 years from now, but like if a new company comes into Framingham or Ashland or anywhere, is the MassDEP going around every 6 months or year and saying, this rusty 50-gallon drum is leaking? We need to put a rubber membrane on it, or so I'm just frustrated with like, how can we prevent that from happening in the future with other companies?
Yeah. Okay. Well, you know, you're talking to somebody who spent my entire career trying to get these sites cleaned up. You look at this site where contamination may have started occurring in the 1920s. You know, we're also, DEP is working with the city and the responsible parties at the 350 Irving Street property, where used to be a coal gas manufacturing plant. That started in the 1800s. Yeah. And we're also working with the city and one of the responsible parties on the Mary Dennison Park cleanup and restoration. And that started as a burn dump at the beginning of the 1900s by Dennison Corporation. These are our toughest cases because for many decades, well, maybe 6, 8, 10 decades, there were no environmental regulations and laws that prevented somebody from saying, hey, there's a swamp over there, let's get rid of our tailings over there, you know, and fill in the swamp. And so there was no wetlands laws, there were no hazardous waste management laws. So there has been a lot of improvement, you know, from the 70s and when the Cuyahoga River went on fire. You know, that's one of the famous touchstones for the environmental programs. The Cuyahoga River? Ohio, okay, yeah. So there's a number, I mean, you know, there was a number of places that, you know, just in this state, the civil action associated with the Woburn contamination and the trichloroethylene and causing leukemia with children. I mean, these are from decades ago practices. People don't do that the way that they did back then because now there's laws and they would get criminally charged if you dump your solvents down the drain like the way that people used to do that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the biggest thing. I mean, I've worked on a number of sites that started in the 1800s. A lot of them were the coal gasifications. There's a paint factory was another one that loaded with lead paint. So who's next, Rochelle? Hi, Carol.
Hi, I'm Carol Boyce with the Health Department, and I'm a licensed site professional, so thanks for doing the presentation. It's helpful. One of the things that I think that the concern here is, you know, essentially what's the potential exposure and how are you going to handle it? And one thing I think that would be really helpful is on your figure, if you actually put the locations where you're going to be doing the treatment and then sort of superimpose, you know, there's quite, as Lauren said, there's a lot of controls on these situations, but you always have a hot zone where you work, and then you have a warm zone where you prevent more contact, and then you have a cold zone, which is another protection. So there's layers of protection within the property, but also like where are your sampling points going to be for the air? Because the most likely exposure would be some kind of discharge from the soil vapor system into the air, and you've got controls for that, but I think it would be helpful for the public to see the different locations where you're going to be sampling, and then, you know, what your action levels are, and then what you would do if you exceed an action level. You know, would you go step out further and then like go near the school or whatever? So those locations would be really helpful for people to see on a map. Maybe that would help the public feel like they have a level of control and comfort.
So we don't have a map in our immediate response action plan that shows the locations so for two reasons. Number one, part of it is based on prevailing winds. So our mobile lab, this is a lab that we use to go to hazardous incidents that are time critical, and we go across the entire state. When I say we, it's not me. I was involved with one of those incidents, but it's another engineer from our office in Wilmington. And so that has a weather station that looks at the wind direction. And so between two factors, the wind direction and people's concerns with sensitive receptors. And again, people's homes and the school would fit this term of what we call the sensitive receptors. And so that's where we would do the testing. And we haven't worked out a location at the school or a frequency at the school, but I raised the issue about how much testing would make you feel comfortable. Where at the startup phase, we're willing to come over and do it daily. Later on, we're willing to come over to the school property and collect samples on 1 day a week or 2 days a week. You know, we believe that it's safe and that this is only to confirm what our beliefs are, as well as to give people the, what's the term I'm looking for?
Comfort level.
Comfort level, yeah. So,
And then also like what you would do if you found that there was a action level that was exceeded, how would you handle
well,
that?
if there was an action level that gets exceeded, then we'll know there's something cracked or broke or something happened over at the vapor collection system, and that's when we notify TRS, and they send their person down. And you know, again, we have mobile handheld equipment as well, so there would be probably a PID survey, you know, going around seeing where can we find the crack or the
So
break.
I think that level of detail is really helpful for us to see.
Yeah. I just want to say, some of that detail, Carol, is in the IRA plan that's online. I didn't cover it in detail now. I was trying to do the less technical. Yeah, okay.
So one of those safety interlocks that I was referring to earlier is a vacuum interlock. So in our conveyance system, this is the vacuum recovery line. Steve was just referring to a break in the line, right? And then collecting samples and trying to track down where that break is. So before samples are even collected, if there is a break in the line or some sort of loss of vacuum, our system shuts down because of that vacuum-related safety interlock that is part of our system. So again, if something happens, someone backs over a line and there's a sudden loss of vacuum, that's a potential for an escape, right? And so we have a safety interlock built right into our system that powers everything down to prevent that from happening. So just before samples are even taken, I wanted to talk about that specific safety interlock.
Same thing with the draft plan I read, you have dig safe.
Correct, yeah, we don't want to come into contact with any of those underground utilities, yeah.
Part of the plan is also to do a ground penetrating radar survey to make sure the same thing. The DigSafe only tells you what connections there are into the street. They don't go onto private property. So there'll be a ground penetrating radar survey done to see if there's anything subsurface that we would need to avoid or need to take care of or something. Okay? Where's the mic now? Okay, yes. Is it Laura?
Yes,
I think I met you before.
yes. I have a question because on the address you said 133, 135 Leland, and yet you
Yeah.
weren't really showing anything for 135, so I was wondering, for 135, it's the car wash? Like it
No.
was,
That's on the other side of the street.
yeah, and I was wondering why it was mentioned.
The 133 to 135 address was given to us decades ago by General Chemical,
Yeah.
as that was their address. I always thought, when you go to the, I've seen an assessor's map in which there is 2 lots of land, and
Yeah.
let me go back to one of the figures. Okay, so this area here on the assessor's map is a separate lot. It was owned by General Chemical, it's part of their facility, but it has, but it's a separate lot. So I always guessed, I may be wrong, but I always thought that 133 would,
Yeah, they had the little dot on the car wash, and I was
Yeah.
going, what was that?
right. So that may be, this front parcel may be 133, and then this other parcel that was tacked on is 135. That's my guess.
Okay.
That long skinny section that comes off the street, you see the faded line and comes and opens up in the back, that's the 2 parcels.
It has frontage on Leland.
See that?
This here?
No, the other side.
Up right
North.
at the top,
yeah.
right, left a little, left.
Left a little, oh, this there.
There.
That long
There's a
skinny
strip.
part that includes building 2, That's one parcel that comes back.
I
and
see.
expands
So
from that.
that's one of the addresses, 135 maybe?
Yeah, and then the
Okay,
other one's up
all right, so I guessed wrong.
That's the
Thanks for pointing out that I guessed wrong
Okay,
on
it was a
that.
double parcel.
No, that's good, Brian, thank you.
Yes,
All right, it's a double parcel then. Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
okay. Who's got the mic?
I do over here.
All right, hi, Mike.
Hi, Steve. Mike Hugo. For those who I don't know in the room, don't know me, I was on the Board of Health for 15 years. Ethan Mascoop, who's sitting in the back corner of the room, who is here on behalf of Sherburne tonight, was our health director. And on his first day in Framingham in 2008, I took him for a drive around town to see some environmental issues that we needed to deal with. So I've been dealing with this issue since 2008 formally. We held 11 hearings. I'll give you a little background. We held 11 public hearings. After the 9th public hearing, General Chemical came in and told us that they were leaving, that they weren't going to go through this public degradation anymore. We conducted about 50 hours. I think our transcript is 1,400 pages long from the hearings that we held here. We tackled the issue because it hadn't been tackled before. We could not get the DEP's attention. There were issues involving trying to get the state involved as our partner, and it wasn't until Steve Johnson got involved with us that we formed a solid partnership to move this along. It was Karen Spilka and Chris Walsh held a meeting, and that's what triggered the General Chemical closure in Framingham. I want to go through and just mention a couple of things in your report, if I could, that I found troublesome. I just got it at 5 o'clock tonight, so I haven't really had a chance to pour into it. But a couple of things I saw that bothered me were that some of at 3.2.1 on your report on dealing with the history of the spills, you failed to take into account the dripping that we have all seen when we've been in the facility, the dripping of the barrels that were leaking onto the floor. Those were never reported, and you talk about documented spills, documented releases, recorded spills in your report, but those would be completely missed, and I think that we need something to acknowledge the fact that that was a present issue that was dripping, dripping, dripping over decades. And that led to a major part of the contamination under the storage areas there. Under 3.2.2, there were, 119 Leland Street is not mentioned anywhere in the report. It would be mentioned there or in the next section. 119 Leland Street is the small house right at Leland Street, right next door to the facility on the other side.
Mike, I think it's mentioned as part of the disposal site boundary.
I didn't see it in the report. I didn't see and I searched it on the computer. I didn't see 119. I saw your other ones.
There was a list of
Right,
properties.
91, 91A, 155.
It's earlier, when we described the disposal site boundaries,
Okay.
and we mentioned probably a dozen properties that have been affected by the spill.
Okay,
by
I
the
just wanted to make sure that
contamination.
was, and I just got this, so I didn't have a chance. I also think that your report somewhere should acknowledge the fact that the plume, even though you're talking about doing work under the property itself at 153, 155, the plume extends, I've always figured the plume to be 1,750 feet long at least. So that's a third of a mile from here going in that direction, and I think that's important to get into the report somewhere to acknowledge that. And also, you mentioned shallow groundwater is seeping into the Sudbury Aqueduct. I think that we need to, there needs to be something that discusses the effect of that the Sudbury Aqueduct is a drinking supply in an emergency situation for metropolitan Boston. And a couple of years ago when it was activated, there was a boil order that you couldn't use the water unless you boiled it, and that was because it went through the property here and picked up General Chemical. So I think that needs to be reflected. And finally, I think that your notations as to Sherburne, and I'll let the Sherburne people speak for themselves, but from what I understand, that it says that that the Sherburne, I think it downplays what's going on in Sherburne. There were hits in the wells. That's not reflected here. And the hits that were found in the wells included toluene, benzene, and other VOCs, even though they didn't rise to the level of any drinking water threat at that point. I think that needs to be reflected in the report that was an issue at that time for us.
I don't think that we're attributing any benzene. The one thing that was shown up at some of the private wells was methyl tertiary butyl ether, MTBE.
Right. Yeah.
That's a gasoline additive.
Right, no, we know that.
We don't believe that's coming from General Chemical.
Right, right. But there were other
Benzene and
constituents
toluene, fit that too.
Right, but there's other constituents, and I think Ethan can probably speak to a lot better, that do come from this area. And my final point is that at page 12 of your report, you say, although L-NAPL and D-NAPL are not anticipated, an oil-water separator will be installed. We attended a meeting. I know that, I think Carol was there. I know Ethan was there at the time. We attended a meeting with the EPA from Ada, Oklahoma. They were in by, it was either by phone or by video. I sort of remember a video connection, and I think it might have been at one of your offices.
We did meet with we did talk to the EPA in Ada at the EPA's office in Boston. That's
Right.
when I first got involved.
Okay, and I think that statement about them not being anticipated flies in the face of what we were told by the EPA, that the General Chemical DNAPL site, and what that is it's an ultra-dense collection of toxics, of volatile compounds that are collected. And the EPA folks told us at that time that may be the worst collection of DNAPL that they've seen in the nation. And I think that needs to get reflected in here somewhere.
So
that is an issue.
when we said in the report, I hope that we said this clearly, we're not expecting light non-aqueous phase liquids, which would be oils and gasoline or something like that, and the dense ones. We know, we have figures, I mean, we have all kinds of information and data about the fact that there is dense non-aqueous phase liquid at the site. That's clear, that's not being contested. What we were saying at that point you're pointing to is we're not expecting to get DNAPL in the treatment train. We're getting the vaporized concentrations of TCE and PCE and TCA, and then they're going to go through a condenser, and there's going to be an oil-water separator. We're not sure we're going to get separate phase TCE and PCE, but we have the treatment train to make sure that if we do, that it's properly handled.
If that's not removed, is that not going to continue to off gas and permeate
this thermal treatment technology, I tried to stay away from this DNAPL. It's a very cumbersome acronym, dense non-aqueous phase liquid. That's basically pure product that's been spilled, dumped, leaked, whatever in the ground. And we acknowledge that it's spilled, dumped, leaked over, possibly 90 years, whether it's oil or the solvents. So we're not trying to downplay anything. In terms of where did I lose my train of thought? The DNAPL, so we know that there's DNAPL in the ground, and this technology is going to heat the ground, heat the solvent's going to vaporize, and then we suck it out of the ground with vapor extraction. So this technology, in fact, that fact sheet that I left at the table, the Citizen's Guide to In Situ Thermal Treatment, they give a brief summary of how it is successful dealing with DNAPL sites, and it's one of the few, if any, others I don't know, but Eva Davis from Ada, Oklahoma said that of the technologies you're looking at, the only one that was proven effective on a DNAPL site is thermal treatment, and that's what got me sold on doing one of the thermal treatments, and now we're doing the electrical resistance.
Okay, and let me close with one question. The truck that you showed us on the screen, I remember that truck because it was sitting about 50 yards from where I'm sitting right now, right on the other side of this wall, when we discovered that there was a hit of a higher number in well GZ6, which is on the
monitoring well,
corner
yeah.
of the building, which I understand number 1 isn't working now.
No, it's been
Oh, is it-
damaged. We have to replace it.
6 is damaged, right, but it's being
We're
replaced.
planning to
Okay.
replace it.
Okay. But when we had that hit, it was attributed to the fact that there was thermal treatment begun under the playground, which forced the
That's news to me.
okay. Oh, it wasn't thermal. Oh, it was
Yeah.
pump and treat. Okay.
It was pump and
Right.
not treat.
Okay.
And-
Okay. So there
and
you go. All right.
They were doing
A
some
poor
type
attempt,
of, they were
okay.
doing some type of biological treatment, and with these high levels of chlorinated solvents, biological treatment is not that successful. And then they were discharging it, and it caused a mounding, and it caused the backup towards the school.
Okay, so that's not going to be, and I think it's important for the school people who are here right now to understand that that's not going to be a factor with what we're doing with this next step.
Not a factor.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
Hi.
I can't find you. Oh, there you are.
Is there a plan, so obviously, when you run out of money doing this treatment, you're still going to be testing the wells continuously every 6 months that we're continuing?
The semi-annual testing?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's going to continue?
We're going to continue with that. I don't know when we won't, but it's a plan to continue to do that.
Okay, so you'll see how the levels continue to either stay stable or not?
Exactly.
Okay, and then one more question. You said 90 degrees, that's Fahrenheit?
No, Celsius.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Thank
Okay,
you.
I'm sorry. That's my fault for not being clear on that. Yes.
Are we good now? Oh, I broke it. They'll charge us for that. I had a couple quick questions. You said that in the beginning you'll be coming daily to monitor. What will you be monitoring?
We're going to monitor the perimeter air, and we're going to monitor, we may be doing monitoring for the soil vapor at that time, but in particular, the ambient air at the perimeter and where the prevailing winds would be blowing. And like I said earlier, we're willing to also test over at the school if it would make them feel better. Or just to, not just that, but to prove that nothing's getting over there.
Why is it daily in the beginning, but then only weekly once it's up and running?
Well, when a system starts up, we want to make sure that if there's any optimization that has to happen, any bugs to work out, it just makes sense to do more frequent testing then. Now, once the ground heats up significantly and we're starting to get a lot of vapor out of there, that's another reason to come back and do more frequent testing. So the testing is not going to end until the system is demolished. It's just there's going to be periods of time when it's going to be very, very slowly heating up the ground and nothing really no need to do an overkill, but we still will do some level of treatment once or twice a week, all throughout the duration.
I just think if you imagine yourself as a parent whose kids go to this school, the idea that you're going to trust that they're going to go to this school and be in this building with close proximity, to be told in the beginning it's going to happen daily, and then once it's up and running, weekly. I think if we could just reflect a little bit on what could be done, not to mediate or mitigate the fears, because I think they're legitimate fears. I'm trying to get my mind around this. My kids don't go to school here. But if I were a parent and I were told that only weekly someone would be coming, and the concern is something that would be in the air, but that you're only here every 7 days, I just would be curious, with the concentration of human beings that will be in a single building in close proximity, is there something that can be done to ensure that at the very least, it's more regularly monitored than once a week, if not continually monitored, especially when there are hundreds of kids right here in the building?
Okay, I get your point. I get your point. We generally make our decisions based on the science and the engineering. There's an added element when you have an elementary school, so we'll talk about it. I just don't want to make any commitments right now. Maybe it's something that we'd have trouble committing to. We feel like we're doing a very robust testing protocol. So, obviously doing it daily for the entire summer would be more robust, but there comes a point like,
I just want to make sure that parents know what they're sending their kids into. I wouldn't want to be in a situation where a teacher is not comfortable taking their kids out to recess, that teachers aren't feeling comfortable opening windows. I just think thinking through the ramifications of what needs to happen, but it was the once a week part that really triggered me, I'll be honest. And in my mind, I was thinking this was going to be continually monitored. And when you said daily, I was with you a little bit. The weekly part was what really made me uncomfortable.
okay, I hear you. Like I said, we'll think about it. We can't. I don't want to overcommit and then have people say that I lied to you. So we got to figure out what we can and can't do. But I do hear what you're saying, and I have to say, and I don't want to be defensive, but in our defense, we have tried to already have a very robust testing program that we thought would provide the comfort level that people would have sending their kids here. And again, I truly believe that from all the literature that I've read, that these in situ treatment systems are safer. I think that any other way of trying to clean up the site would pose different and more serious concerns for health and safety. So that's why I'm so gung-ho about it. All right. Yes. Me, Ethan?
Yes, yes. Thank you. Steve, thank you very much. I think this is a lot of complicated information and to try to cover in an hour and a half or so. So I don't want to really delve into some of the technical stuff, but I'd rather go back. If you can go back to the slide of your timeline. I think it's your second slide.
No, it's probably second from the end.
Okay, I don't remember. Okay, there we go. Thank you. So, for example, here we have a comment period from February 7th to March 2nd, and I know that's a very short time period for public comment, and there's a lot of material to digest. For example, when I went on the website this morning, I took a look at your announcement that was sent out by email, and on the link, it did not send me to anything close to Framingham. It was to a dashboard portal for all sorts of other information, and if you didn't know how to find it, you would not find that website or that link to a page that would direct you to the various documents that we're talking about.
That was in the meeting notice?
Yes.
Okay.
So somebody should actually, if you put a simple suggestion, for example, if you put a link into a meeting notice, you should actually check it out and see if it works.
Yeah, I thought I had.
Yeah, it doesn't. It goes to a dashboard portal, and you have to.
But then the dashboard portal doesn't allow you to go from there to the General Chemical site?
You'd have to know really what to look for. It's not intuitive. And if you do go to the documents, you go back to the old website for South Framingham and the environmental justice page. So, but you have to be able to find that. And also these documents are not there. So it's a very old page, but it's still being used. You're still being directed to that. So
yeah, no, somehow you got it on the wrong page because all of our information, up to last week is uploaded.
Okay, I'm not suggesting I'm a computer genius, but I managed to get to something that maybe is very old. But I wasn't able to access this. And I was doing it very quickly, but I was not able to access this.
I'll send you the link again tomorrow, but
along those, if I may.
not to interrupt you, but I do want to say, Karen here is reminding me to point out now, in blue here, you can't read it, I know. I tried to get it changed to white text, but on the handouts, somebody check that, make sure that it's not blue there, but that should have our link directly to the site.
Well, just to follow up on that, my point being is this: it's not easy to find, and there's very limited time it needs to be, I think, a little bit more. You need to check it out. However, more importantly, though, in terms of transparency, in terms of public information, for example, there's a number of questions here. People are concerned. Well, if they're testing the air, if they're sampling the air, and only weekly or daily or what have you, there's now technology where you can actually post it online in real time. And you could have all that information out there so everyone has access to that information. And they know if you're sampling, once a week, twice a week, or whatever it happens to be. That might be a way of helping, get the information out to the public, and they can see for themselves.
Well, I'll ask the guy that runs our mobile lab if he has that technology, but I'm not aware that MassDEP has the technology to upload things real time.
I don't know if you do, but it certainly exists. The
Oh, yeah,
technology
well.
does exist. And I think that's something worth looking at, particularly when you're looking at it in such a sensitive area such as here. I think as well, I think overall, the bottom line is, and I know you've mentioned it and you're not going to respond to my question, but the question is looking for responsible parties to help pay for and fund for additional cleanup. And that's really the key here to get to that point. And I'm not sure if there's enough pressure on the AG's office and the DEP department or Department of Environmental Protection to really go after those responsible parties. And I know they're working on it. I know you can't.
I'd say thousands of hours have been put into that.
I understand, but still, at this point, I think the urgency is really there, and that's my overall comment. That I think more pressure needs to be put on, and those documents are there in terms of who sent waste over. We had so much at the Board of Health office that we compiled, and I know that they came and they did do some work there, and I know that they reviewed some of those files, but. Again, I don't think it's, that's really where the effort needs to be placed. And again, I'm not commenting about the technical material here, but I'm just talking about overall. And I appreciate the work you're doing. I appreciate the fact that you're approaching, you're trying to get at least about 40% of this, the contamination cleaned up. But ultimately, it's still not adequate. And I know this is what you can approach for the money that you have. And actually, and going back, and I know Mike Hugo mentioned briefly some of the history, I would add to that originally under the site assignment that it was issued and approved by DEP when I came on board, the amount of money that was set aside by DEP, required by DEP was approximately, I believe, $79,000 for cleanup. And it was not until we began to delve into all this that the increase was up to about 1.8 million or so. But originally when I came on board, it was less than $100,000. And that was with all the reviews and all the, the site assignment was renewed every 5 years.
That was what, 2000 and what? Or was it
2006.
2006, yeah.
Yeah, it was. I think it was $79,000 or $89,000. I don't remember the exact fund. And that was the amount. And then we pushed very, very, very hard to get it up to even that. And we knew back then that close to $2 million would not be adequate for cleanup and closure. So I just wanted to point that out in terms of historical information.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
1 second, Mayor.
Yeah, when people are asking about air monitoring, because of the volatile substances potentially getting into the air and how frequently we're monitoring.
Your microphone.
But I want you guys to explain this because I'm not answering it.
I'll have to repeat the question.
Yes, there are things built into the system. There were a hole or a loss of vacuum. Those are the things that would cause that.
Yeah. Okay. Karen's explaining. I think Lauren did try to explain why we're not monitoring every day. Yeah. Okay. So Karen's making the point that the readings, the vacuum readings that TRS has that are continuous readings, that's where there would be, if there's something that gets into the ambient air, then it would be likely to be from that vacuum system, and that would send an immediate alarm to their company, and they would investigate that immediately. So the vacuum, the power would shut off on the system so that it would not continue. Okay? Mayor Spicer.
Good evening. I'm Yvonne Spicer, Mayor of Framingham. Thank you, Steve, for this very informative presentation. Will this PowerPoint be available online so we can put it online on our webpage?
Karen's nodding her head, so the answer is yes.
And as I listened to a number of the questions around the room and to alleviate some of the concerns and trying to work very closely with the Public Information Officer, Rochelle Santos, and also Kelly McFalls that does public information for the city to really try to create those frequently asked questions, and certainly working with Dr. Wong's office, Sam Wong, who is our Director of Public Health, trying to put up as many questions, frequently asked questions, and opportunities to have more conversation. Will there be any other forums that parents can come to? Because I know school vacation week is coming up, and typically it's harder to get public comment and other information in. So just trying to think about ways in which to have some outreach to the parents about this, a one-pager that can go in a kid's backpack at home, so families families can have a better sense of what's happening and what will be happening over the next couple of months.
I want to believe that the fact sheet that we put together, that was a fact sheet, not for the site as a whole with the history and everything, but specific to what we're planning to do and when we're planning to do it. So I'm hoping if you have a chance, I know you didn't have a chance to look at it yet, but if you do, I'm hoping that that answers that question and that those can be disseminated to whomever. So if not, then Sam has already sent me a couple pages of questions. If that fact sheet didn't cover what you are concerned with, then please, yourself or Sam or somebody, let me know where it's lacking, and we're willing to try to. One thing, it also, before we get to the next question, I think you got me thinking. Something you said got me thinking about what kind of communication will there be going forward. And I worked on another case where there was a community involved, and we actually had sidewalk meetings every Friday morning where we talked about what we did and what we accomplished during the week and what you can expect next week. I think that's probably not an applicable type of thing here, because there's going to be a lot of weeks where nothing really has happened other than confirmatory testing. So, but I do think the general idea of giving updates when certain milestones have been achieved, or giving somebody a heads up that this is to inform you that the system has been constructed and debugged, and we're going to be starting up the heating process. To try to give people a heads up that what's coming up. So we'll try to work on that.
Thank you, Steve. That's real helpful, because just to be able to make sure people are aware of what's happening, and it's the not knowing that oftentimes create a lot of the confusion and certainly some of the angst.
I agree, and that's why we're here tonight, because we don't want people that want to know to not know. Oh yeah. So Karen, I'm being reminded that if you want additional information going forward, then make sure that you've signed up and put your email address down. People whose email we already have, you're already on a mailing list, you don't have to do it again. But for those of you that don't have the email, you're not on our mailing list, then you'll have to add your name there. Sir.
Yeah, I was thinking about the concerns about parents having their students in a building next to a major cleanup. And then I looked at the timelines. And I'm glad the superintendent is here, by the way. The timelines say that cleanup actually starts mid-June and ends in September.
Right.
So is there a way, again, the superintendent's here, that since that is summer vacation, that this school could be taken offline after the end of the school year until the beginning of this next school year, and whatever summer programs happen here be done by bus, because we do have a very big bus system, taking them to another school to do the summer program, considering this happening here. And also, since the actual cleanup starts in mid-June, so I figured for the weeks when it starts till school ends, and when school begins until it ends again in September, if there could be, to allay the fears of the parents, be daily monitoring, since there would be a lot less time, and it would be, the time constraint is not that great.
Okay, I thought you were going. I thought where you were going was, can the kids go to some other school? But you're basically getting at the level of monitoring. Could there be?
No, it was both.
Oh.
I said in the summer, where there is no school other than special summer school programs, that the kids could go to school, a different school in the summer. But there's still, it's starting mid-June, and that's the end of the school year, and it's ending in September, which is the beginning of the school year. So those two times.
Okay. Well, that would address the comment that this gentleman over here made. So what I told, as I said earlier, we'll see what we can do. We can't overcommit, but I do want to acknowledge this concern.
I know. That's not for you generally, too, because the superintendent, it's for the school department to
Right.
not have summer programs here and bring them to
Right,
other schools.
exactly. That's not for me to say.
Absolutely not. I just thought I'd make the
Yeah.
suggestion.
Yes, you have a microphone. You have a microphone. You're up.
I do, yes, thank you, and thank you for the turnout tonight and for so many of you working so hard to make sure that we even got to this point, and I'm happy to see so many of my colleagues from the City Council here and our state delegation. Jack Lewis asked a good question, and it seemed to resonate with a lot of people about the air quality monitoring. You know, if you're a parent and you read that, well, there's an acceptable level of whatever dangerous chemical, I can't imagine that you want to risk your kids. I'm wondering if, and this is kind of a follow-up homework assignment perhaps for the mayor and the health department, is there anything, how complicated would it be for us on a local level to do some supplemental monitoring? It sounds like there is technology out there. It sounds like it's somewhat accessible, and it might boost the, not that there's a lack of confidence, but I think emphasizing the confidence is important. So if our teams locally could follow up and make sure that we're as overwhelmingly transparent, and perhaps that helps allay some of the well-founded concerns that the community in the neighborhood has. Is that something that your projects have done? Has the municipality done something like that previously? Or are we just hopefully going to innovate?
Whether it's been done before, I can think of a couple of cases where the municipality had some obligation, and they worked and contributed to the cleanup effort. It was mainly when they had some responsibility for it too. So I don't know of any. I can't think of any off the top of my head of cases where the town or the city did their own testing, but I don't see why that would be a problem. It would be there is a restriction though in terms anybody that wants to go onto the general chemical property has to be authorized and trained in safety the safety procedures. So.
Could I just ask then the mayor to follow up with her team to look into that and maybe let the city council know in her next update to the council at our next meeting, and hopefully we can move this forward and make sure that the community has all the information it needs to feel good about the project as best as possible.
If someone wanted to do their own testing on the outside of the fence line, then that I don't see how that would affect us.
Mayor, would you have those conversations in the coming days? Thank you very much.
And it's about 60 pages. So if parents want details, go to the library. And there's 3 racks on general chemical. So.
It is at the library. It's in the library at Sherborne as well. I dropped them off last week. Well, the other thing is though, but the slides that we printed out, the last page has this URL that you can't read up there but it's in white print, and that's where people can access that report online. So they don't have to go to the library unless they want to. Okay, thank you. Sam.
Steve, Sam Wong, Public Health Director for the city. Thank you again for coming over to present it to the public. My question is more for Lauren. Will the system generate any wastewater? And if there is, how is it going to be discharged? There's no sewer connected to the building. They're on septic.
So yes, so there's two different process streams that come out of this type of remediation, and that's process vapor, which Steve described is going to be treated using granular activated carbon, and then there will also be liquid. Right? You're dealing with steam, we condense that steam, and then we generate a liquid as a result. So that liquid is going to be treated locally at the site using another type of granular activated carbon, and then it will be discharged. So there's going to be a permit that is eventually going to be in place. We have the option to discharge to some sort of sewer connection down the road, or we can also containerize the liquid because it's a small volume and simply dispose of it using like a waste hauler. We'll take it too. Those are a couple different options. Those details are currently underway right now in the design.
Thank you.
Can I just add one thing? The Board of Health is also a repository of information. If anybody needs anything from General Chemical, we keep electronic copies. So the hard copy is at the library, but we have electronic copies that are available, and we could, print some pages for people if they're interested. And also we have some hard copies of the past data too, if people are interested.
Yeah, I didn't bring a hard copy. Brian told me, don't bring any paper over here. We've got enough.
Okay, all electronic.
So it's all electronic, good. Yes?
So just, I think, to follow up, one of the questions that was asked, but the general sense of safety. Lauren said that you have the shutdown fail-safe to protect if anything breaks. Is there a plan in place if that doesn't activate, or has it always activated? The shutdown component.
Yeah, so what's the backup to the backup? Is that what you're asking? So, the backup to the backup is people, right? People are the best backup plan. So we have folks going out to the site and monitoring the system. So the particular incident that we described, and that's the loss of the vacuum, it's a switch, and it's pretty simple. But you're right, there is a potential for that to fail. And if that's the case, then the operator who's in charge of keeping that system in operation mobilizes to the site in a daily routine type of event, and then it's a visual inspection. That's how it's discovered.
So basically, has it ever happened where it has failed and then some of the chemical vapor or whatever has gotten out?
Yeah, I'm not aware of that particular switch failing in the means that you're describing.
Or I'm not interested in the particular switch, but has there ever been any leakage or something that might be harmful? Basically, we're saying to the children or residents in the area, has anything like that ever happened where the safety valve, the shutdown didn't operate?
Yeah, I can't think of that scenario. As I mentioned before, talking with some folks over here, these systems are in operation at a lot of different, very public spaces, underneath coffee shops, in restaurants. So they are frequently, inhabited. I mean, much closer than even this school is to the actual property. One particular system that we just shut off last year was at a university, for instance, where students, walked over the system in operation. Vehicles drove over it. Again, it was one of those systems where we put all of that infrastructure below grade so that public access could be maintained during the operation of the system.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to add to that, and I hear the concern, and we've always been aware that this school is here, so it's not like anything new that we haven't thought about before, and that's why I wanted to give the principal a heads up last Friday. So I don't want you to think that we're taking it lightly, because we're not. We thought we were planning to do a very, as I said, robust testing protocol. I just want to point out, I mean, there is a value to getting this site cleaned up. And we have a budget to clean up what we hope is 40% of the cleanup of the waste. And I have to say, I don't know of other technologies, other techniques of getting this site cleaned up where we could give a guarantee that there would never be a problem. So, I'd ask you to keep in mind just the idea that, any mechanical equipment could have a fail, anything that could happen. So we think that we're taking the right precautions. We have a safe technology. If you a lot of you don't know me, so you don't, I'm not expecting everybody to take everything I say for granted, but you can check, there's the fact sheet that I put out there. There's a section on the fact that how safe these systems are, the ERH systems. People, most people are fluent with social media, and you can check online. So I'm hoping that if people check it out and ask enough questions, that they'll get to that level of confidence that I have or Lauren has. So, Carol, do you have the microphone?
You've done this in other communities. We talked about this earlier before the meeting. Maybe there's a couple of communities that have had this event, or have this kind of treatment or remediation, and there's health departments or cities that dealt with this, and so they could give us, if you give us a couple of contact names, we'll just contact them and try to.
There's two Massachusetts Superfund sites, Groveland Wells and Silresum, that have used the ERH technology, and I'm sure that you can access they're pretty good about having reports on each of their Superfund sites online, and they would have a project manager contact there. So that would be a start. Those are relatively local applications of your technology. I'm pretty sure that there was one, I don't know if I asked you about this, it might be before your time with TRS, the Naval Weapons plant in Bedford also did ERH, but that was probably 10 or 15 or something years ago. Judy? Wait, now, where's the microphone? Okay, sorry.
Steve, you remember the leak at 350 Irving Street, the gas pipe was hit, and I got calls from people saying, what is that odor? Is there any odor in this vapor? If some vapor escaped, this chemical vapor, would you smell it?
I don't know. Some of these solvents, these chlorinated solvents, are described as odorless and colorless. I don't know if these, like TCE and PC, I don't know.
Because that would be a warning to people if they're, and that's the point to the gas having an odor, so you know it's in the air.
There's a chemical that's added to natural gas to give it that odor. Yeah. Do you want
So I'm not sure what your name is. I'm sorry, I didn't catch it. But you mentioned, it might be valuable to explain the volume of air that's going to undergo treatment at this site. This is a relatively small volume of air. What we're going to have, being treated at the site is like much smaller volume in air than even the air that's being recycled in this room, if you can picture it. So it's an incredibly small volume of air. I guess, they're just to try to help provide that perspective, we're not talking about like a big stack like you see at power plants. This is a pretty relatively small operation, I guess. That's what I want to explain.
I just think it makes it seem less scary if
yeah.
picture this, because I don't think we can picture what we're talking about. Leaks. What are we talking about?
One side had a system that seemed to be roughly the size. You went back on there.
It's in the slides that you have.
You're talking about 400 horsepower motor?
No,
It's a 40 horsepower. Yeah. It's a 40 horsepower. Yeah. Yeah. And that's a vacuum. So we're attempting, what we need is to apply a low vacuum to the subsurface. And we are, we are going to be treating under 1,000 SCFM of actual air that we're pulling out of the subsurface, and then we're treating through our equipment. Yeah. What's that? Less than 1,000, yeah. Yeah. Per minute, yeah. Standard cubic feet per minute, yeah.
I just wanted to ask if there's any residents from Sherburne, if they could raise their hand. Okay. I was just curious about Coarse Brook. Is there any, would it be caution for the animals in way down that use it as drinking? Because they mentioned horses and some other animals that use Coarse Brook in the detailed action plan.
Yeah, there is a reference to, we're supposed to look at all the different exposure pathways, including ecological receptors, and so it's just our speculation that the animals, the livestock might drink from that, or there's some, I think there's some ponds, irrigation ponds or something, so we would just, but the thing to keep in mind there is the concentrations. By the time they get down that far downstream, they're pretty low. Yes?
When the system is up and running, what do the employees or the contractors who are on the site wear for part of their do they get protected from something that they might be exposed to there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in our world, the construction world, we use what we call personal protective equipment, right? And what our workers wear during construction, the construction phase that Steve was describing, is safety vests, and that's to make sure that the equipment that's being run on the site can see them very easily, so they're wearing the high visibility reflective vests. They're also wearing hard hats, steel toe safety boots to protect against something that might fall on their head or fall on their foot. They're also going to use gloves too, so there's utility knives that are typically deployed at sites to protect from cuts while they're using those knives. That's the most common type of PPE that we use at our sites. And then during operations, it tends to wind down a bit. We're not dealing with overhead clearance issues, so what you'll see is hard hats will come off, but we still maintain the high visibility vests. It's just a standard thing that TRS has. And then the steel toe safety boots too, just to protect in case we drop something essentially, or trip.
I don't know if the question, she may be asking about respiratory protection.
Oh, I'm sorry, none of that is planned at the site, yeah.
What if, like, someone was responding because a shut-off happened, because maybe, like, you had said something about vacuum was lost or something? Or
yeah.
How would they respond then? Would there be some protection for them?
So we have what we are preparing, and it's part of the design package that DEP is going to be receiving momentarily, but a health and safety site-specific plan that our workers then follow. And we use that to identify just that situation that you're describing. So we use field instrumentation that monitors total volatile organic carbons, or compounds, excuse me, and we've got specific levels that we need to operate within. So we have to deploy additional protective gear if we reach those levels. But in that scenario that you're describing, we've never had to deploy that type of setup. But our folks are ready for it if something like that was to happen.
So if that happens, how are the neighbors going to be notified to be able to protect themselves if that needs to happen?
So, are you doing monitoring that you want to describe? I mean, the weekly monitoring, the air system. This is like, there's so much dilution that happens in the air. Using that same handheld field-based instrument, if you wouldn't even be able to detect it on that instrument. We're talking about such low levels. So during those types of events, we receive notification that something has happened, mobilize to the site, and shut the system off. It's that quick. I don't know what kind of shutdown related information that's going to be discussed with folks, but
we at my office, we have emergency response staff, and if there is anything like an emergency response needed, then they would be out here, and they're on call 24/7. We're not expecting anything like that. It's the resources there if needed, and the guy that is running the mobile lab is in charge of the emergency response unit in our office. So he would be down here with his lab, and he does. The one incident I responded to with the mobile lab, there was 10,000 gallons of diesel fuel tipped over, a truck tipped over, and was going into the Mystic River. And so he was out there sampling the air, sampling the water, and making decisions about whether something was acceptable or not. And so he has that ability to take real-time data that he generates and then compare it with standards or sometimes his own judgment, and then say what needs to happen. It's just so unlikely that we'd have to evacuate a building, like even the closer butters. But I mean, if we had to, it wouldn't be out of line with other types of emergencies that we've handled in the past.
Over the years, I have given General Chemical a lot of grief, and occasionally MassDEP. And as some of you may recall, thermal technology is exactly what we proposed. The state has moved on that. They have picked the ideal solution for this site. You might want to have them do more thermal treatment, but they are doing the best thing possible, and they can definitely make this safe for everybody. So I hope everybody appreciates the big forest through the trees. This is a great thing that is happening.
Thanks. Thanks, Andrew.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. All right, I must have muted it. Probably sick and tired of hearing me speak at this point in time, but when DEP originally approached us about this project, they had a lot of questions, and we've been spending a lot of time talking about vapor and sampling and the frequency of the samples. And one of DEP's original questions was, how frequently should we do sampling? And my response to them was, at that point, well, it's typical for us, and the people that we work with, they typically deploy samples, if they choose to sample, about once a month. So we would recommend that you do it about once a month. And, DEP's, I think, personally, in comparison to the projects that I've been involved in, really going above and beyond with the weekly sampling program that they've included for this project. And then to even, in addition to the weekly sampling, also do, during select phases of the project, daily sampling too. I think it just goes above and beyond and really shows how much they're just concerned about the community here. So just wanted to provide that perspective, with regards to the projects that I'm typically involved in compared to what's being done here.
All right. Is there any further questions tonight, or is everybody ready to go home? All right. And but if you think of anything in the next few weeks and you want to send an email, you have my email address. If you just want to call, that's okay too, but it'd be great to get emails. And thank you all for coming. Where's Rochelle? Thank you, Rochelle.